we officially declare Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, all 239 of the passengers and crew on board are presumed to have lost their lives.
The aircraft was declared lost. It never landed in Beijing. Hundreds of distraught relatives would be left without answers. There is an official hypothesis about where it crashed, but nothing has been found. Some private individuals have attempted to calculate where it might be using their own professional experience.
This aircraft didn't disappear in one click. It disappeared over a couple of hours. Okay? It was being watched. The military, who use other forms of radar, mainly primary radar, they were watching it for some time, and they watched the aircraft virtually do a 180-degree turn and fly along a line precisely between two areas of air traffic control responsibility, that's Vietnam's and Kuala Lumpur's responsibility, so that each side thought the other side had responsibility and nobody questioned what was going on.
In fact, the flight flew right over Penang and northwestwards out over the Andaman Sea before disappearing. What could possibly have happened aboard? A number of safety issues were coming to light, together with various theories as to what might have happened on board. Two travellers on Italian passports were found to be Iranian refugees who presented false passports. But the hijacking thesis was quickly discarded when the two Iranians were identified. However, another terrifying hypothesis came to light.
We think that there was a case containing 200 kilos, maybe 240 kilos of lithium-ion batteries loaded aboard this aircraft. Let's imagine that this crate was loaded into the front cargo bay. When you go into a 777 cargo bay, which is a high ceiling space, almost as high as here, you're in a room, a long room that's several, maybe 6 meters wide. And in front of this room and under the cockpit, there's a bulwark that separates the cargo bay from the electronics bay.
Sous le poste de pilotage, il y a une cloison qui sépare la soute de ce qu'on appelle la soute électronique.
The communications bay of the Boeing 777 is separated from the cargo bay by a thin bulwark and a door. If the lithium-ion batteries had been loaded against the bulwark, any explosion would have cut through the separating wall and the communications bay, releasing toxic gases directly into the air conditioning. This might have knocked out the crew and passengers, leaving only the pilot enough time to don his oxygen mask.
When a lithium battery burns, it produces a fireball, a flash that burns out very fast, that doesn't burn very long, a real flash that releases an enormous heat, that releases mortal gases very quickly.
Et également qui dégage des vapeurs qui sont absolument mortelles rapidement.
Without communications and struggling to find somewhere to land, the fainting pilot could have headed for the closest airfield, missed it, and turned back before losing consciousness.
Quelle va être la première réaction d'un équipage qui se voit soudain envahi de fumée?
What will be the first reaction of a crew that is swamped by fumes and realizes that they're dangerous fumes? They put on their masks. They try to communicate to alert someone. And the first thing they do is to turn towards the closest emergency landing strip. The aircraft did, in fact, according to the presumed radar trace, the aircraft did turn towards an airport that could have worked as an emergency airport in case of a catastrophic problem aboard. So the aircraft did in fact follow an erratic route, and this erratic route could have been due to the fact that the pilots tried to find a new route to do something, but one might have fallen unconscious before the other. Two
other lithium battery-related incidents in the past decade suggest that this is a possibility. Flight UPS-9 from Dubai crash-landed in the desert after the pilots signaled a fire aboard provoked by lithium batteries. However, the fire was so catastrophic that the aircraft crashed.
Et il y a eu deux accidents de 747 cargos. L'un a eu lieu au Moyen-Orient et l'autre en Extrême-Orient.
There have been two accidents involving 747 cargoes, one in the Middle East and the other in the Far East, over the Pacific, a short time after takeoff. In the case of the Middle Eastern accident, the flight lasted just a few minutes. The captain, it seems, had left his seat in the cockpit full of fumes to go and get a mask, because his wasn't functioning. But the co-pilot, on the other hand, who was equipped with a mask, said just before the aircraft crashed that he couldn't even see the instruments. Such was the smoke in the cockpit.
Qu'il ne voyait même plus les instruments tellement il y avait de fumée dans le poste de pilotage.
The supposed fire didn't bring the aircraft down, unusual, and two, didn't cut off the communications, very unusual. So it's something that you wouldn't expect. And the aircraft was still flying, and we could still see it on the military radar. It was still flying very successfully as it goes around Penang. So the time between the fire and somebody not controlling the aircraft is quite long. If there's a fire, you do want to get the aircraft on the ground as soon as possible. Land as soon as possible is what the checklist says.
It's someone in the cockpit who, on the upper control panel above the pilot's head, can press 4 or 5 buttons to open the circuits, like the disjunctors, that are simple pressure buttons. He presses and turns off the generators, the two main ones, one in each engine, plus the backup, plus the turbine that you hear when you go aboard an aircraft. You hear the turbine at the back of the aircraft that supplies power to the aircraft at times, and the fifth generator. If you turn off all 5, then the RAT is deployed automatically.
The investigation brought to light another disturbing fact. Pilot Zahari Ahmed Shah had mapped a route to the South Indian Ocean on his personal computer simulator. Why?
Le copilote était un jeune homme qui était en train de démarrer brillamment une carrière de pilote de ligne.
The co-pilot was a young man who was beginning a brilliant career as an airline pilot, which isn't the worst job in the world. As for the captain, he'd had a great career, and although he was like anyone else with his ideas, with a life, but he'd showed no signs of mental stress, unlike other crashes caused by suicide of the pilot that could have been foreseen or were foreseeable. While here there's nothing that could indicate that there was a deliberate decision on the part of a crew member.
Suicide qui, dans tous ces cas précédents, aurait pu être prévu, était prévisible. Tandis que là, non, il y a rien qui semble indiquer qu'on ait eu une volonté délibérée d'un membre d'équipage.
We know that this aircraft must have been directed for the time that it was watched by military radar. It must have been directed by somebody who knew how to fly the aircraft and how to navigate it and how to operate its systems. So we're probably talking about a pilot. There were only 2 pilots on board. We don't know if this was a deliberate act. We don't know the precise motivation for it, but it might have been revenge against Malaysia, against the airline, against the employer, against the government. You've got a huge device with Malaysia written down the side of it. If you want to get your own back on something Malaysian, making that airplane disappear might be rather a good way of doing it.
However, speculation on the reasons for the loss of MH370 will only be fully dispelled once the black box, or flight data recorder, has been found.